There are places in the world that feel strange because they're dangerous. And then there are places that feel strange because they should not exist the way they do. A valley hidden deep in the mountains. Roads so narrow and twisted, they feel like a mistake. Bridges made from vines hanging over a river far below. Villages clinging to slopes where villages should never have been built. And a history so blurred by legend that the deeper you look, the less certain everything becomes. This is not the Japan most people picture. No neon skylines, no bullet trains, no giant crowds. Instead, there's a place in Tokushima Prefecture so remote that even in modern Japan, it still feels cut off from ordinary reality, especially in its deeper eastern reaches, where the landscape stayed isolated for centuries and roads arrived very late. And that is exactly why this valley makes no sense. Because once you see it, one question starts to take over everything else. How did people live here? Why did they stay here? And what kind of place becomes more mysterious the more modern the outside world gets? This is the story of Iya Valley. Deep in the mountains of western Tokushima, on the island of Shikoku, Iya Valley cuts through steep terrain filled with forest, canyons, and blue-green rivers. It is widely described as one of the most remote regions in Japan, and even getting there still involves narrow, winding mountain roads that make the journey feel like part of the test. That is the first reason the place feels wrong. Most valleys invite settlement. They open up, they give people room, they make farming and travel easier. Iya does the opposite. Its slopes are steep, its roads are difficult, and its geography seems almost designed to push people away rather than pull them in. And yet people did live here. Not only did they live here, they built communities on hillsides, created a distinct local culture, developed farming practices suited to the landscape, and held onto ways of life shaped by the valley's long isolation. That contradiction is the heart of the mystery. Iya looks like the kind of place human beings would pass through carefully. Instead, they stayed. And because they stayed in a place this severe, the valley began to gather the kind of stories that only grow in landscapes hard to reach and harder to control. One of the most persistent stories tied to Iya Valley is that it became a refuge for members of the defeated Heike clan after the Genpei War more than 800 years ago. That story matters because it fits the valley almost too perfectly. If you were fleeing enemies, trying to disappear into a place difficult to enter, difficult to cross, and easy to defend, Iya would make terrifying sense. Local tradition says the famous vine bridges of the valley were linked to that world, built as crossings that could also be cut down if pursuers came too close. And whether every part of that legend is perfectly historical or not, even travel and cultural sources describing the region admit that the line between fact and legend here has blurred over centuries. That is what makes Iya Valley so powerful as a setting. It is not just remote. It is the kind of remote that creates believable myths. A valley like this does not need ghosts to feel haunted. It only needs steep cliffs, dense forests, and the idea that the wrong people once had very good reasons to vanish into it. And once that idea gets into your head, everything in the valley starts feeling slightly unreal, especially the bridges. If there is one image that defines Iya Valley, it is the kazurabashi, the suspended vine bridges stretched over the river. These bridges are the exact sort of thing that sound poetic until you actually picture them properly. Not steel towers, not modern suspension systems. Vine bridges. The versions standing today are rebuilt replicas, reinforced with hidden steel cables for safety, and the remaining bridges are reconstructed regularly. But they preserve the form of something far older and far stranger. That detail matters, because the bridges are not mysterious just because they are old. They are mysterious because they represent a solution that feels both desperate and brilliant. In a valley this rugged, crossing a river was not a convenience. It was survival. And the deeper you go into the valley, the more surreal the crossings become. In Oku-Iya, the most remote part, there are not only vine bridges, but also the so-called wild monkey bridge, a manually pulled wooden carriage suspended on cables and used to move across the river. That is the moment Iya Valley really stops feeling normal. Because a place with a hand-pulled crossing dangling over mountain water does not feel like modern Japan. It feels like the landscape invented its own rules, and the people living there had to adapt or disappear. The bridges are beautiful, yes, but they are also evidence. Evidence that this valley was never easy, never ordinary, and never fully domesticated. Another reason Iya Valley makes no sense is that it seems to preserve a version of Japan that the rest of the country moved past long ago. National Geographic describes it as a glimpse into a bygone era that never fully modernized in the same way as much of the nation, and ties that directly to the valley's long geographical isolation. That shows up everywhere. Traditional hillside hamlets, thatched homes in places like Oku-Iya, local architecture, local crafts, and even food shaped by the fact that the terrain made ordinary rice agriculture difficult, helping make buckwheat soba more central to the region. That is not just quaint culture. That is geography writing itself into human life. People often talk about culture as if it floats above the land, but Iya Valley proves the opposite. The land decides first. The mountains limit movement, the slopes shape settlement, and the difficulty of farming changes what ends up in the bowl. That is why the valley feels so intense. It is not merely scenic. It is a place where the environment seems to have forced a whole human world into unusual forms. And even now, when you can drive in, visit, and photograph it, the region still carries the feeling that it belongs more to the mountain than to the nation around it. Then there is the visual logic of Iya Valley itself. Steep sandstone gorges, forested mountains, jade-colored rivers, cliffside views so dramatic that even modern viewpoints turn the valley into something close to a hallucination. National Geographic highlights its blue-green rivers, grand valleys, and steep canyons, while travel accounts point to dramatic bends like Hinoji and to river gorges such as Oboke and Koboke that make the entire region feel oversized and unstable. That matters because the valley's mystery is not only historical, it is visual. Iya does not look comfortable. It looks improbable. The villages seem too exposed, the roads seem too thin, the bridges seem too fragile, the drops seem too deep. You keep expecting the whole place to admit it is an illusion. And then you remember that people raised families here, built homes here, crossed these rivers here, and made an entire cultural life inside a landscape that appears to resist every one of those choices. That is where the title comes from. Not because the valley is fake, because it is real, and reality like this feels unreasonable. Iya Valley is often described in two parts, the more accessible Nishi-Iya and the deeper, more remote Oku-Iya or Higashi-Iya. That split is important because it means the valley almost comes in layers. One layer introduces you, the other tests whether you really meant it. The deeper sections are repeatedly described as some of the most remote in Japan, and even people writing about the valley as a travel destination stress that getting all the way into Oku-Iya takes serious effort and time. That depth changes the psychology of the place. Most famous destinations reveal themselves quickly. Iya withholds. It makes you earn the view, and in doing so, it keeps part of its atmosphere intact. Even now, in a country famous for infrastructure and accessibility, this valley still protects itself with geography. And then there are the details that push the place from mysterious into surreal. A statue nicknamed the Peeing Boy perched high above the valley floor. A remote village called Nagoro, where life-size dolls stand in for the disappearing population, making the region's demographic decline visible in one of the strangest ways imaginable. That last detail almost feels too symbolic. An isolated mountain valley, already half legend, now populated in part by human figures that are not human at all. If you wrote that into fiction, people would say it was too much. In Iya Valley, it is simply another layer. What makes Iya Valley so memorable is not one single feature, it is the collision of all of them. The remoteness, the Heike legend, the vine bridges, the old hamlets and mountain food culture, the cliffs, rivers, and canyons, the unsettling sense that modern Japan somehow flowed around this place instead of fully absorbing it. That combination creates a valley that feels less like a destination and more like an exception. An exception to geography, an exception to history, an exception to the neat image people carry of Japan. It is one of those rare places where the facts are already strange enough that you do not need to exaggerate anything. A valley this isolated became a refuge of legend, preserved dangerous-looking crossings, developed its own distinct patterns of life, and still sits there in the mountains like a pocket of another era. That is why Iya Valley makes no sense. Not because it has no explanation, but because every explanation only seems to make it stranger. Japan has a valley where defeated warriors may have vanished into the mountains, where vine bridges still define the landscape, where the roads twist through canyons and forests, and where old ways of living endured because the land made modern ease almost impossible. That valley is Iya, and the deeper you look at it, the harder it becomes to see it as just another scenic place on a map. It feels like a region that survived by being difficult, stayed mysterious by being isolated, and still unsettles people because it looks less like a valley made for humans and more like one humans somehow negotiated with. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. If you had to cross one of those vine bridges into the deeper part of Iya Valley, would you do it?